Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Pilot Lawyer Podcast. Thank you for your attention while this important legal information is reviewed. What you hear should not replace consultation with an attorney and should not be considered advice for your situation. On behalf of the Pilot Lawyer and your entire crew, it's our pleasure to have you aboard.
Welcome, aviators, to the Pilot Lawyer Podcast. With us, the Eisen brothers at the Eisen Law Firm, where aviation law is all we do, nothing else. You're here for what we do best, navigating the FAA medical certification process for pilots and those who want to become pilots. And as we say around the office, if you don't laugh, you cry. And for the next 30 minutes, we hope to bring you the lighter side of what we can consider to otherwise be a frustrating process. I've messed it up, but just keep it going, keep it going.
I don't care.
So whether you're laughing at us or with us, join us brothers as we discuss the fascinating, excruciating, just incredible world of FAA medical certification.
Why is it we say, if you don't laugh, you cry?
Because if you don't laugh, you cry.
It's a foregone conclusion.
Well, the thing is, it's such a frustrating thing. You know, people just want to go berserk. People want to go berserk over this whole certification thing that they're so worried and they're so frustrated and they're so aggravated.
It doesn't mean that we don't take it seriously.
It's very serious. I mean, it's what we've devoted our lives to doing. It's a small community. And we're trying to help folks in our best capacity.
Yeah, but I think it's important that we try
to just keep people happy.
Keep it light, because otherwise it's going to get real heavy real quick.
How would you like
Just like you.
How would you... Whoa. Fat jokes already?
We're not even 2 minutes into this podcast.
Give me one.
Okay, what do you want?
One that compliments fat.
Ooh.
I'm flying!
You'll never do that again.
The idea, though, is...
You ever heard of weight and balance?
You've heard of weight.
There's no balance.
You certainly don't. Check your checking account. There's no balance there. Am I right?
Hey.
So anyhow, the idea is we're trying to keep people happy because...
Well, it's just kind of like the stage of his emotions here. I mean, like you start off, you get letter of investigation in the mail, you're crying your eyes out. And then as you go through the process, it becomes more and more ridiculous and you just start laughing at it because that's all you can do.
I don't know if
like
that's
someone who has no idea what they're talking about.
Accurate. I just get the records.
So what are we talking about today? And by the way, this is the Big Cheese.
I think what I would like to talk about, and maybe what you don't want to talk about, is Reddit.
Bozo agrees.
What is Reddit? I ain't Reddit.
How long you been sitting on that one?
I just came up with it, and that's why I'm the Big Cheese.
It hatched.
I'm capable of thinking on my toes.
I'm not.
That's intentional falsification.
I think if you're capable of thinking on your toes, you got some kind of medical condition you haven't disclosed to the FAA.
It's crazy.
Hey, stop looking at your phone and pay attention to me.
Trying to keep up with our clients to make sure that we are the best in the business.
Oh, well, that's important.
Best in the business.
But anyhow, essentially, I wanted to talk about Reddit and what we might see on there from other people that are questioning the medical certification process with the FAA. And I know a lot of times we'll talk to clients that have researched their...
When are you talking to clients?
In the nether periods of the day.
After hours.
After hours.
With the Eisen Law Firm.
Anywho, clients that have tried to research similar type situations that they may find themselves in, they've gone on Reddit and they see somebody that seems to have a similar situation. And then you got 30 other guys that seem to have had a similar situation, each with a different outcome. And so oftentimes there's a lot of confusion out there as to what to really expect when dealing with the medical certification process with the FAA, as it kind of relates to other people that might seem to have similar cases. And so I wanted to talk to you about what kind of stock or faith or reliance you should put on Reddit.
I'm going to just button it up right here, right now. You can turn the podcast off after this. This is akin to going on WebMD. My tummy hurts. I go on WebMD. I got bowel obstruction. I got cancer. I got gas. I got the whole gamut.
We know Alex isn't getting a medical. So you want to talk to me about that? You dragged me in here off of my computer to talk to you about this over the microphone.
Listen, we all know what's going on with you and that computer. Too much.
So here we go.
This is actually an intervention. You're a workaholic.
Workaholic, baby.
Not an alcoholic. Not the good kind. You're a workaholic.
I'm just aim to please. So you go on Reddit and there's Tom Thumb with his thumb Tom trying to tell you what exactly happened with this FAA medical certification issue. I've seen some crazy stuff on there, son.
Well, let's talk about this. Like, obviously, it's just like with this podcast, we're not really dispensing legal advice to any individual in their respective capacity as to what their problems are. But you go on Reddit and you're going to see a bunch of people trying to give kind of almost legal advice, I would say. Wouldn't you agree?
I certainly would agree.
And
So let's say
that seems problematic.
it's problematic. I mean, that's number one, problematic. Are you giving legal advice? Especially, well, what are your credentials? Do you have any credentiality?
I mean, it's one thing, this was my experience, but to say it's got to be this way every time because this was my experience doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the case.
Yeah. So, and I think another factor is, well, are you getting the full picture? You know, so I go on there and I see somebody, oh, well, I was denied for substance dependence and I had I didn't even have a DUI. I had tuberculosis and somehow it turned into DUI. You know, you just get these fantastical, I said. You get these fantastical descriptions of what's happened and why they've gotten denied. Well, how do we know that what you've said and what you've done, the records you provide, you don't know anything perhaps about the FAA's processes and what they're looking for and so on. So all you get is this sort of jilted experience from the FAA back, sort of saying, oh, no, you've got substance dependence, for example. And then next thing you know, you're ranting and raving, perhaps rightfully so, because you're frustrated on Reddit. And then somebody goes and reads that and they connect to their situation. But really, at the end of the day, perhaps had you known what the details were, the ins and the outs of that particular case, you would see that the person maybe really had nowhere to go other than potentially a denial with a substance dependence. So then you put that on yourself to say, well, I'm going to end up like this person as well because this is what happened there. And then what I hate to see happen is somebody give up on aviation altogether because they went on Reddit and say, oh, well, this is how it is.
What about people that may go on Reddit and temper the fact pattern or maybe not give... Maybe they see it somewhat differently or they're viewing it through rose-colored glasses. I think the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. Sure. We're not
talking about your eating habits. What? All right, garbage in, just incredible loads of garbage out.
No, that's... Anyhow, enough of the sound effects, Larry. Maybe that should be my new name. Sound effect Larry. Anyhow, I think sometimes people might have a tendency to maybe give what they perceive to be the better fact pattern than
how about
the reality actually is.
Here's an example. Somebody calls up and they want to consult with us and they say, hey, I had anxiety for a year and that was it and I'm done. We work with them, get their records. Okay, this doesn't look to be anxiety for a year. This appears to be bipolar disorder for 5 years and 2 years worth of rehab for your DUIs and so on and so forth. So what appears to be people's perception and how what
their medical history is versus what it really is
sometimes
have an
varies.
impact.
So if I'm Larry Law going on Reddit saying, let me read about this situation here now, son, and am I going to get a medical? And you see Barry Stitzel. Is that a name I could use? Is that generic enough?
I think it'll get the point across.
And saying, hey, listen, if you got anxiety, you're going to get denied for the rest of your life. You're not getting the full picture, son. Yeah. Now, what about some of these people that are out there giving advice on Reddit? Not to name names, okay? Don't start naming names.
Well, I wouldn't dream to name a name. I mean, there aren't enough.
You wouldn't dream?
Oh.
Jeez.
I wouldn't choose just a random commenter on Reddit to be my wingman. Just saying.
Now, at this point in the podcast, people are probably sitting out there, what are these guys rambling on about? This makes no sense.
I don't even know.
This makes no sense.
I'm thinking that myself.
I think the long and short of this podcast, and the emphasis on this should be short, that
you're used to that.
Moving on.
That essentially you go on Reddit. It might be a good spot to try and maybe inform yourself as to what some of the issues are out there and generally what's going on with respect to medical certification. But don't take it to be that this is going to be exactly what the outcome will be for you or
I think we made that point. We had moved on. We had moved on to
now we're talking about
taking unsolicited advice or solicited advice from people on Reddit directly to you. From people who intend to relay themselves as experts.
Well, I think there's some out there that say that no medical certification matter should take more than 6 months. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely not.
Well, what?
I don't agree with that.
I think what he's asking is, would you agree that you've seen statements to that effect on Reddit?
No, listen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misread it. I misread it. Okay.
It looked like the clown you are.
Hey, you know what? Waka waka.
No, but what I'm saying is, I believe there are individuals or groups or advocacy services out there that have said, oh, well, no medical certification matter with the FAA should take more than 6 months from start to finish.
Has your FAA medical certificate been denied? Are you concerned you may not be able to get a medical certificate from the FAA? Are you at risk for FAA action for failing to report your medical history appropriately? Call the pilot lawyer at 1-855-FAA-1215 to discuss your options for getting the FAA to issue your medical certificate and get you flying. We are happy to evaluate your case and discuss with you a plan for presenting your case to the AME or the FAA. Aviation law is all we do, nothing else.
If they're saying that, I take issue with that statement, unfortunately.
Why? I need an answer now.
The reason being is that there's a lot that goes into this. Here's to wit. How long does it take you to get your records? How long does it take you to generate the appropriate appointments, the appropriate documentation from your doctors? How long does it take to review all that and make sure a submission is appropriate? How long does it take for the file to matriculate through the lower level examiner, the legal instrument examiner review at the FAA? How long does it take to get to the physician for review? Is there interdisciplinary reviews? Does it go from the drug and alcohol department to the neurological panel, for example? Does the file need to go to DC for review by a chief psychiatrist, which in and of itself could be a several months evaluation or queue, if you will, to get to the psychiatric evaluation or other review by the Federal Air Surgeon's Office? 6 months is just an absurd reference, unfortunately, for most processes and difficult cases. Now, if you had diabetes, a simple case of diabetes, if you had a simple ocular problem, if you had a simple, what's another simple thing?
Tummy aches.
Tummy aches. If you had whatever, if it's simple, sure, 6 months is reasonable. But most complicated issues, including those unfortunately involving a lot of mental health disorders and so on, will likely take longer than 6 months.
Mental health, what about substance use disorders?
Yeah, that could take at least a year if it's substance dependence, because the FAA needs to see recovery satisfactory to the Federal Air Surgeon, and that requires going to rehab, going to aftercare, establishing data with ongoing testing, with
and you have to do all that before they'll even consider giving you a medical.
Yeah,
right?
So that's going to potentially be 6 months of data collection in and of itself before you even submit it to the FAA for a lengthy review.
So take what you read on the interwebs from anywhere other than the pilotlawyer.com. If it's on the pilotlawyer.com, fine. You take it, you run with it, and then you give us a call. If you read it on other sites like Facebook or Reddit or there's
TikTok.
other like
can't mention the websites you go to, I guess.
Yeah, well, you know. There's drums involved, different style. You know what that means? Our listeners will. So, point is, you just definitely want to take that stuff with a grain of salt, right?
How often do you go to church, son?
Often enough.
Boy, let me say this to you. Not only that, but I'll just go ahead and get it out there. Can I get okay if I expose this?
I'll turn my back.
You get it out. You put it out there. I'll call the cops real quick.
Let me say this, though. There are some folks, unnamed, amongst the crowd, and there's a lot of people, oh, why would I get an attorney involved if I've got a medical certification problem? If I need a doctor, I go to a doctor. If I need a lawyer, and I go to a lawyer. You know, so what's your response? Can you provide a response for me, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. Why would you go to a doctor for a legal problem?
Oh, sorry, I just got distracted by your comment here, and
I'm going for a medical certification.
So essentially, you wouldn't be going to see a doctor to get a medical certificate if it weren't for a regulation telling you that you need to have a medical certificate in order to utilize the privileges of your airman certificates.
Yeah, but what can a lawyer say to the doctors that are reviewing this at the FAA?
It may be what's said. It may be what's not said in terms of protecting your case, because everything needs to be looked downrange. Ultimately, if the FAA denies your medical certificate, you can petition to the NTSB for review of that denial. When you petition to the NTSB, your case is going to be before an administrative law judge for the NTSB, who's then going to apply the federal rules of evidence, federal rules of civil procedure, as well as board rules with respect to litigating that case to make a determination whether or not the FAA erroneously denied your medical certificate.
Are you trying to say that what I put into my file now could potentially affect that down the road, and that perhaps I am trying to make sure that my case is presented appropriately so that when it gets to that point, or even to prevent it getting to that point, perhaps?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And I'm also a little bit curious as to why this voice has crept into our podcast. Who's this fourth person?
I thought that maybe I sounded more relatable. Maybe a little more mature.
Yeah. Remember the last time you tried this voice?
Yeah, I lost my voice for a week.
Probably for the best.
Well, let me say this much. Are you telling me to be untruthful to the FAA?
Who said that? Nobody said that.
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
Why are you saying that?
Well, because I'm just asking to clarify, because I'm nervous that I don't want anyone to perceive that we're telling anybody to lie, because that's not what we do here.
Yeah, there's absolutely none of that going on. What I'm saying is you need to preserve or make sure that your rights, to the extent you have rights in this process, or that any of your, all that is preserved, essentially. Someone's looking out for you in this legal process. The doctors, the AMEs, with all due respect,
who do they answer to?
The FAA.
Yeah, I mean, they go for training by the FAA. Do you get to go for training by the FAA?
They won't let me in.
Yeah, well, that says a lot. But I'm saying...
Because you can't.
The FAA trains the AMEs at week-long seminars with respect to how to fill out FAA 8500 applications for Airman Medical Certificate forms. Do they give you a week-long training on how to do that? No.
I had to get that my own.
So, I mean, long story short, there's a lot of nuance that goes into these applications. As there's a lot of nuance in people's medical histories, arguments that could or should be made or maybe shouldn't be made, things that should be provided to the FAA because it's relevant to the question, things that maybe aren't relevant, that don't need to be provided to the FAA because, one, they haven't asked for. Sometimes they tell you, hey, we don't want every single record from your hospital.
I've seen that.
Have you seen that?
You need to...
I mean, so they're kind of telling you to go through it and make sure that, we don't want it all.
Another example is perhaps we want to make your case look even better by getting you to like a him psychiatrist in a mental health case. Or maybe we would want to do that instead of just having your treating physician, because we know it's going to waste you time, right? So for example, what can we put in front of the FAA that's going to build your case and make it look as good as it possibly can, to where the FAA is going to appreciate it when they look at it?
Because we're thinking downrange as to, if we're in front of a judge before the NTSB saying that the FAA made an erroneous decision, well, what was it they had at their disposal at the time they made the decision? Was it just some treating physician's opinion, or was it somebody that was skilled in the arts of aerospace medicine saying that you're good to go, and yet they're still denying you?
Well, furthermore, this whole doctor to doctor thing, we're not going in there.
Well, he's a doctor. What does that do for you?
Nothing.
So you mean to tell me?
Well, let me
listen.
Am I going to the FAA though when we send out a client and say, hey, this is our medical opinion because we think X, Y, and Z? No, we're using the medical information that the airman has undertaken as the evidence to present to the doctor. Say, listen, this airman has seen this doctor and said X, Y, and Z. This doctor, X, Y, and Z. This doctor, ABC. And then presented it to the doctor to say, hey, listen, under the regulatory guidelines, your policies and so on, this evidence from other doctors, we believe supports eligibility for that doctor to review.
They're treating you in a medical capacity to help you get better. Nobody cares about that in this particular process. This is about whether or not you meet the regulatory requirements to hold medical certification.
You know what the interesting thing is? Last podcast, I cut Alex off because I said, you don't talk enough.
Yeah.
Now I'm cutting him off.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
Tell us what you have to say.
I don't think I want to.
When are you serving lunch?
I don't know. After this, you can quit jibber jabbering.
Anywho, you had something you wanted to share?
Well, you were asking about talking to doctors. And when I was in private practice, having to do peer-to-peer reviews to order an MRI or whatever, it was like talking to the biggest bunch of blowhards you'd ever meet in your life. So I don't feel like having a doctor going to talk to another doctor. It's just going to become into
Tit for tat?
Yeah. It's just, I can't say what's coming into my mind because it's a family thing.
What if you were a doctor and you had a disagreement with the other doctor? What pull are you going to have at that point?
Yeah. Oh, it's my word versus your word.
Yeah.
Well, that guy's an idiot. He only practices in funguses.
Foot fungus.
Anyhow, relating this back to Reddit, because I guess that was how we build this podcast.
You read it before?
I hardly
Did I
read
make
it.
that joke on this one or the bloopers?
I'm not sure, but it plays
Coming this Christmas, the Pilot Lawyer Podcast blooper album. Yours for a cool $45.99. No, that's not $45.99. That's $4,599 because we're a bunch of blood-sucking, money-hungry lawyers.
At least you're honest about it. Long story short, with the Reddit crowd, I think it's important that you inform yourself, but be very cautious as to how what you see on there applies to you, as well as
Do you have
who's trying to sell you on there for their services.
Yeah.
I think Sound Effect Larry said in one of our first podcasts, had this whole diatribe about how every case is a snowflake and each one's unique. And
I think that plays.
so just think about that when you're reading your Reddit.
How are they supposed to think about that?
As a snowflake.
Provide us the analysis, if you will.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, don't, because nobody wants to hear from you.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So all I'm trying to say is I'm getting ready for lunch. Listeners, do you think that's enough? Yes. Yeah, so essentially, if you want to be fly like me, you got to give me a call.
What's our phone number?
855-FAA-1215. You want to see how that plays? It's a play on words, boys.
For those out there that don't get it or haven't cared enough to think about it, the 1215 is the universal distress call on the
Distress squawk. Distress squawk.
distress squawk.
It's the
Squawk at 121.5.
It's the stress squawk is what I said.
De-stress?
Distress. It is distress. But I accidentally said
I like
stress.
distress.
I got the stress squawk all the time.
Every time he walks.
His legs, his thighs. It's the ground that's stressed when I walk.
Wherever I fly, I'm constantly on 121.5. I don't squawk 1200.
Your generic squawk.
My generic squawk is
It's always. That's too funny.
You know what happens when I land the airplane? This is what I often hear.
We're live.
Now, every so often, I'll land and I think I'll hear this.
But in reality, it's this.
Okay, I think we've played with it enough.
Hey, yeah, we go ahead and bring that bass to final on this one because I think we're pretty much exhausted. What was otherwise like a 2-paragraph blog article, we're now trying to get as much out of it as we possibly can, and it's not playing well. So, I'm the guy that's supposed to say it.
Yeah.
You're supposed to
Looking
say,
at me like I'm the
you're
idiot.
supposed to say something to me that signal me that it's almost time to wrap it up.
Hey, guess what? Wrap it up.
All right. So if you're looking for a good time on the website, it's thepilotlawyer.com. Check that out before you go to Reddit. Give us a call. If somebody blasts you on Reddit, just give us a call. We'll run it down and we'll tell you, yeah, they were right or no, they were wrong. It's that simple. Or call somebody else. See if we care. So, you got anything else to say?
I think you would care. In fact, I know you would care.
I really.
Hence this whole podcast.
It's not to say that we have competitors. We have colleagues. But when you see your colleagues being filled with, as though a tick with blood, with overflowing, overflowing business. Well, I just want to help folks. Well, you've logged another uneventful half hour listening to the Pilot Lawyer Podcast. And even though our wives deny they know us in public.
Hang on a second. Has that actually ever happened?
Yes.
You haven't seen me at the deli.
Or Ling's Buffet.
Hey, that's a plug for Lings.
Well, they'll appreciate that. Everyone, Ling's Buffet, Lakeland, Florida.
I think they have frog legs. Used to be Piccadilly.
You got those frog legs while frog fishing.
That's right. Hey, bringing it back to relevance.
I go out frog fishing, and sometimes I go frog hunting, and sometimes I go hog hunting. Just depending on my preference. I do. I don't think I could kill an animal. Go ahead. Well, you've logged another uneventful half hour listening to the Pilot Lawyer Podcast. And even though at least mine and Alex's wives deny they know us in public, Christopher's wife denies she knows him
She wouldn't
at
know.
home. We are the Eisen Brothers of the Eisen Law Firm. We'll see you next time, if there is a next time, God willing.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.